Now, first off, um, we're going to go throughout 2,000 years of, at least, probably more, of history. So bear yourself, brace yourself, and you're going to be astounded to find out that most of what you think of as Santa Claus comes from a 20th century commercial. So without further ado, this is the History of Santa Claus, the world according to romance. My name's Romance. Check it out. Alright, so the original holiday, Christmas, is a word that came into the English language right around, I think, around 1100 AD. And it's, of course, if you break it apart, Christ's Mass. It's the one Mass of the church year that is about Jesus' birth, so it's Christ's Mass, so it became Christmas. But that was when they started really putting the stamp, the Christian stamp, over this pagan holiday. It was a much older holiday. It was, of course, a pagan holiday that predated Christianity. And that holiday is called Yule. And to all my pagan friends out there, Happy Yule. I'll be celebrating this year for the first time in a couple of years. I'm going back to, messing with paganism again. Why not? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, Yule is an ancient Anglo-Saxon word or Germanic word for the word wheel. And it is believed that in most ancient pagan cultures, and definitely the Germanic one, that the year is a wheel, okay? And it goes around and around every year is another cycle and another turn. And every year is represented by a man who is born at the beginning and is a baby. And then he grows throughout the year, and as the year goes on, he grows old, and then he dies on Halloween. And then in between Halloween and December 21st, there is no one, and then he's reborn again. And I guess it's like an incubation period, and that's where you get the idea of like the New Year baby. Or if you've ever seen a depiction of New Year's where there's like an old dude like with a scepter, like a skith, like the dude, the death dude. Image that we have, and then a new little baby New Year. That's where that comes from. Anyway, the New Year began on December 21st. That is the shortest day of the year, and that is what the ancients went by. Now, also, if you live in, we live pretty far north, but we don't live far enough north where it really kicks your ass. Like the shortest day is December 21st, of course, and then here it'll get dark around 4:20, and every day after that will get lighter. Like if you're living above the Arctic Circle, it's not going like this is real dark. It's getting dark at like 1 o'clock. The sun's coming out at like 11 a.m. and going back down at like 1. Like it's real pathetic. So it's a time of year where you really do need something to celebrate to keep your depression from acting up, and a time to feast and a time to stay warm. It's freezing cold. And it was during this time of the year that that hunting and what you take what's left of the harvest from farming, and then you go on a big huge hunt together. And usually Christmas wasn't this far back. This hunt didn't happen until it happened earlier. It happened usually on like December 1st through December 6th, and then the feasting would begin now. Or at Christmas time, what we now call Christmas time, but. It was originally a Germanic thing that was in honor of the god Odin, or Wotan, as the Germans called him, and there's different variations of Odin in different places, but he is a father god, and depending on your actions during the last year, Odin would bless you. If you were good over the last year, he would bless you with a good hunt. If you were bad, if you were an asshole, and you didn't follow his rules, he'd give you a bad hunt. So right there is already a striking similarity to something that must sound familiar to all of us: the judgment of whether someone was good or bad. All right, but again, the wheel year. There's 8 holidays in the course of a year. Yule is not the biggest one in most pagan celebrations, but it is an important one for survival. So, again, the further north you live, the more vital it is to you getting through the winter, man. I mean, winter's tough no matter where you're at in the northern hemisphere, but it must really suck being in like Alaska or Greenland or Iceland or where all this shit came from, Scandinavia, which is Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. All right, so now the other thing that you have to that I have to bring in here is now this is just I believe this is just a Norwegian folklore, but or maybe it was Norwegians and Swedes, but like they did have a legend that there was a dude who lived so far north that like he was almost inaccessible, but and he got around via reindeer herd, and I mean, and the whole fact that there's reindeers involved, you're talking either Finland, Norway, or Sweden. Like it's just that or northern Russia, but we're pretty like this all came from a Germanic tale. So the fact that there's reindeers involved, we're north. All right, so there was a kind of I think that's where the name Kris Kringle actually comes from. He's the guy that lived so far north or so close to the North Pole, you couldn't even get to him. He had to come to you, and he came and helped people get through the winter. All right. Now, again, we have many different names for what we think of as Santa Claus. Now, that's the pagan tradition of it and the Germanic tradition of it. But Christianity arose. It arose in the Middle East, and one of the first places it went to was Armenia and then Turkey, and then to the Greek cities and what would later become the Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire was, of course, its capital was Constantinople. The western part of the Roman Empire was governed from Rome. They had a festival called Saturnalia, which some of our traditions come from that as well. I'm not really going to get into the Christmas holiday today. Today is more about Santa Claus. So before I get off on that tangent. So, all right, Rome split in two halves. Constantinople is the capital of the eastern half. And yes, there was a guy there who was part of the church, a young guy involved who has become, is working his way up the ranks of the Catholics and so forth. Well, not Catholics, Orthodoxes, because they didn't have Catholicism in the eastern half of the empire. They only had Orthodoxy. So, anyway, there was a guy named Nicholas, okay? And he found out, he was working for the church. He found out that, he wanted to help people around him. One of the first things he did was he found out one of his neighbors didn't have enough. It was a girl who was getting married, and her family did not have enough money for a dowry. A dowry, which doesn't make any sense today, was a big, huge deal in ancient customs. When you got married, if the girl didn't bring any bread to the table, there was no marriage, and then the dude would have to find another girl. So it was important that a girl had money. So St. Nicholas gave this girl enough gold so that she had a dowry so she could get married. And he did it by leaving money in her stocking. Everyone in those days would hang their stockings above the chimney to keep them warm. All right, that was like a way to get your clothes nice and toasty. Put them over the fireplace. So he put the money where she would find it, in her sock, and he started just going. He eventually started helping out kids, giving kids toys, giving poor people money, and he started doing it by going from roof to roof and dropping it down chimneys. That's the information I got. I don't know if that legend's 100% correct. If you can prove me wrong, do it. I'm not saying I'm perfect. But anyway, St. Nicholas was a real person, and Christmas did begin to... He lived like around 150 AD. Like, he lived during the Roman Empire, all right? He became a saint. He definitely went on to become one of the biggest saints in Christianity. We don't really think of him that way anymore. But there was a while where he got so big that they had to start downsizing him. The church started downsizing him because he was butting up against Jesus and Saint and Mary in importance. So the rest of Christianity didn't, wanted to get rid of paganism, but wanted to keep Christ's holiday or Christ's Mass or Christmas. And they started taking over traditions, inserting Jesus into these ancient customs. Just the idea that, I just said before, a new child is born every year on December 21st, according to the pagans. Well, they said every year the new child is going to be named Jesus, and it's going to be his birthday. Jesus was probably not born on December, even in December. Jesus was probably born sometime in spring, because uh, shepherds went out to watch their pastures during, like, that shit happens in spring, in like midwinter through spring, not in December. All right, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. A different show, etc., etc. Saint Nicholas did live. Adeste Fideles, so come all you faithful. That's probably a Christmas carol he sang. I'm going to do a show on Christmas carols too, and how old they all are and where they came from. So again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But Christianity proliferates throughout the centuries. Centuries go by, hundreds of years, and it's kind of a dual thing. Like, there is a Christmas, but there's pagans everywhere, and they're still celebrating their pagan festivals. But there's Christians everywhere, and they're celebrating the Christian form of it. And they're like butting heads, or sometimes the Christians are conquering pagans, sometimes the pagans are conquering Christians, back and forth and back, and this stuff's getting all mishmashed. But eventually, Christianity does end up taking over all of Europe, and all the rest. Monotheism pretty much takes over all the world. So that eventually, and after what was Martin Luther, who lived in like the late 1400s, early 1500s, that wanted to get rid of the whole, like, Saint Nicholas thing. Saint Nicholas was getting too many props, but every other country was starting to have their own version. And then plus, you have Germanic countries that still have the idea of Odin, the Odin hunt. So there's these, like England has Father Christmas. The Anglo-Saxons still had an idea of like a Santa Claus, this Odin hunt, and they became Christians. So now they have this Christ child to deal with. So it's natural that we ended up getting kind of like a mumbled, jumbled version of the two rolled together. Like I said, the word Kris Kringle, that was in most of the Germanic countries. Somehow, Holland changed their name of Santa Claus to, instead of calling him Saint Nick, they started getting into Saint Claus, or Santa Claus, and somehow or another, that's who their Santa Claus was. And the idea of Santa Claus it varied. Now, some people said he was an elf, just like the rest of his workers, so he was a little guy, and that he was like kind of a skinny little dude. Other people say that he was jolly and this big, huge, like bacchanalian, this almost like Dionysian person, this big, jolly, fat, white-haired dude. Okay, so like the description of Santa Claus also varied from person to person, place to place, and story to story, and belief to belief. How much gifts he gave, how much gift giving was a part of each culture, also started to vary. It wasn't when we crossed the ocean and when America was discovered, we had many different forms of Christmas there too. Different parts of America began to celebrate Christmas in different ways. It was the reason we have Santa Claus, and we say the word Santa Claus and not Father Christmas and not Kris Kringle or St. Nicholas. We usually say Santa Claus, has to do with the city of New York. New York, and that's a show in itself too. It blows my mind that New York City was once New Amsterdam. It once was all Dutch. Like it can't be understated. I can't get into that enough, but we're gonna have to not get into it on this show for time purposes. But New Amsterdam was a Dutch city. It was the only big Dutch colony that was out there, at least in America. Really all over the world. Like, they had little stations everywhere, but New York, the Dutch actually tried to make a proper colony. And it worked for a while, and it was kind of an amalgamation. It was kind of an anything goes, anyone can come type thing. But eventually, in it started in, I think, 1630s, 1640s is when New York was technically founded by the Dutch, and it lasted up until, I believe, like the 1680s, 1690s, when there was the Queen Anne and William and Mary were Queen and King of England. That's when they took over. England took over New York, New Amsterdam, and made it in New York. A lot of people that were living there didn't like that. They wanted to keep their old customs, and one of the things they did was they kept Christmas the way that the Dutch did it, not the way that the English did it. So they kept calling what we now call, the English call what we call cookies biscuits. Well, in New York they kept calling them cookies. All right. And they definitely Father Christmas is what the English call, what we call Santa. In New York, they're like, fuck the English, man. We're going to keep it our way, and we're going to, it's Santa Claus. So those two things, not much is left of Dutch New York or New Amsterdam, but those two things came down to us in our culture from that, believe it or not. And then, so Santa Claus stays on as kind of America's Father Christmas, all right? And it also, I forgot to mention with Saint Nicholas in Turkey, the Eastern Orthodox one, he was also the patron saint of children, which is how children got tied into this. And then the whole gift giving thing, it sets up the whole future of what we know now. But in New York in the 1700s, we had Christmas. There was gift giving, but we did call it Santa Claus, but we were still celebrating it in a very English fashion. It wasn't until the early 1800s where a poem, you've heard the poem, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." See, that was published in either a weekly or a bi-weekly journal. Before there was TV, people had nothing to do but read, man. All there was to do was read books. It must have been boring as shit. I went without a cell phone for like 4 days last week. I thought I was going to go bonkers. I can't imagine anymore. But anyway, people read weekly magazines, and this was something that was published in one of them as poem in like 1820s or 1830s. And that's when we first got the Donner, the Blitzen, the names of a lot of what we think of as Santa came from that poem. The name of all the reindeer, the way they're coming down the chimney, the leaving out the milk and cookies, etc. That happened in New York, and it spread all around the country. And for the rest of the 1800s, slowly but surely, like there was no. If you were a writer and you wanted to sell, for some reason Santa sells, okay? Christmas sells. People would buy into it this minute they see it or hear it. So, a lot of writers, Louisa May Alcott, not a Christmas writer. She took her hand at writing something about Santa. Washington Irving took a whack at writing about Santa. A lot of people just made up stories, and then suddenly there was a Mrs. Claus, and suddenly they lived at the North Pole, and they had a factory, and the elves weren't just hanging out with him; they were his workers, and they made toys, and he drove. His sleigh went all around the world. It steamrolled into what we have today. But very much, even in that poem that I speak of, the image of Santa wasn't defined. Some people said he wore green, okay, a green coat. Some people say he didn't really have a beard. Some people say he wasn't really that fat. All right, all we knew that his cheeks were red, his nose was red, and he had a big belly. All right, that was like the only thing that was going across the board there. So finally, like in the 20th century is when it started really getting commercialized, when we started really cashing in on Christmas and Americanizing this holiday into the gift giving and into the, Thanksgiving ends, then Christmas begins, and you light the Christmas tree and the Christmas lights and everything that we associate with the holiday started really coming into fruition in the beginning of the 20th century. Well, Coca-Cola did a bunch of ads And I think it was Harper's Bazaar or Harper's Weekly that Twas the Night Before Christmas appeared in, and I think it was the same periodical that I could be wrong on this one, that gave that Coca-Cola did a whole spread, a whole bunch of shoots of a Santa Claus and you've seen these pictures, you've seen these old pictures from like the 1930s of Santa holding a Coca-Cola. Somehow that is the image that encapsulated what we think of as Santa. And movies, the next thing that came out, Miracle on 34th Street, then slowly but surely TV shows everywhere, department stores. Santa was a big fat guy with a big long white beard with a big bright red coat, black belt, black boots, the whole nine, the whole thing that we think of came through from, believe it or not, a Coca-Cola ad. Yes, there was other images of them. Yes, it was, we kind of had that image in the past, but it was never truly defined. So in this day and age, what does Santa mean? What does Santa sells? Santa is, he's so much more than just what we think of him as, because there's religion going on there. There's ancient paganism. There's ancient Christianity. There's all kinds. It's a wonderful amalgamation of so many things. And, I'm psyched for him to come see me this year. And I hope you're psyched for him to come see you. Believe in Santa, even as an adult, because really Santa isn't about giving presents. Santa is about giving love and helping out others in the hardest time of the year. Merry Christmas, guys. World According to Romance. Peace.